They lied to you about Henry Cavill returning as Superman to uplift the box office of Black Adam. They lied. 2 days before the Flash movie was released, they announced that Andy Muschietti would direct the Batman movie Brave and the Bold. They lied. I can promise you they will come up with some scheduling reason why Andy can't make that movie. That's my prediction. Wait and see. Would you like to hear yet another lie? Here we go. The DCEU's final movie gets disappointing crossover update from director. You ready? With the DCEU coming to an end, this year the director of the franchise's final movie shared a disappointing update with regards to crossover possibilities. More than a decade after Man of Steel started the DCEU with a number of changes to the story behind the scenes, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom will close off this franchise before James Gunn brings his new DCU into the spotlight. With this film ending that old era of DC cinematic storytelling, many are wondering if it will feature any sort of crossovers with other heroes that would give a fitting farewell to the decade. Old universe? Of course not. In a similar vein to The Flash featured Ben Affleck's Batman, which was a shit cameo, and Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, which was even a more shit cameo. Speaking with comicbook.com, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom director James Wan confirmed that the DCEU sequel will be something of a standalone film. Really, James? Is that why I saw Michael Keaton cameo in one of the early test screenings of the film? Is that why Jason Momoa was in his trailer with Ben Affleck bragging that Ben's Batfleck was going to cameo in the movie? And now we've had details of Batfleck deep sea diving with Aquaman. Really? But all of a sudden, it's standalone. Looking at how the first Aquaman was a very standalone film, Wan noted that the approach was the same for Aquaman 2, putting the story in its own separate world from the rest of the DCEU. So that's why they're doing reshoots. Well, Aquaman, even the first film, has always been a very standalone film. That was always our approach, that it kind of lives in its own world. Nothing wrong with that. And that's kind of how we've approached The Lost Kingdom as well. Well, The Lost Kingdom is kind of standalone, but these cameos did happen. Certainly the Keaton one happened, and when Keaton wasn't a possibility, when Adby and DeLuca took over DC temporarily, it was going to be Batfleck. We're not going to get either of those cameos, I don't think. But wouldn't it be a celebratory thing to do? To have Henry Cavill cameo, have them all cameo, their entire Justice League. As a, bye-bye, it's been fun, even though it hasn't been fun. It's been a decade of pain and shame. But at least do something. But no. People love Jason Momoa. People love him playing this role, and people love the action visuals of this space and this world. And that's what we're doing. We're taking it to the next level, and we're still expanding. And just any fans of Aquaman, the character that love Black Manta, this is the next level. And I'm very excited to finally put out there to show them what we've been working on all these years. You know what? Can I just say one thing? I'm actually excited about Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. I'm more excited about this film than I am Blue Beetle because it's huge, it's epic, and I think people, when they watch it, will enjoy it. A lot of people think this film's going to be a flop. Wouldn't it be funny if this final DCEU movie made $1 billion? Go out and watch it, everyone. Make them look fucking stupid. What does it say about the new plan if the final movie from the old universe makes $1 billion? And I bet you it happens because it's the only movie they have on this slate that's worth watching. I can assure you of that. Will Aquaman 2 include any DCEU crossover moments? Rumours had actually pointed to two different Batman cameos coming in Aquaman 2, with Michael Keaton at one point being in line to appear before it was changed to the DCEU's own Ben Affleck. Jason Momoa himself even taken to social media to hype up Affleck's comeback for a second time this year after The Flash, although this quote puts that appearance into question, with it being a more standalone film. First of all, James is saying it's a standalone film. It doesn't mean there's no cameos in this movie. Wait and see. Looking back at the first Aquaman, the story only held minor references to the greater DCEU, with Mira mentioning Arthur Curry's battle against Steppenwolf from both cuts of Justice League, and offering a nod to the events of Man of Steel. Whether Aquaman 2 takes things any further is a complete mystery, but with this movie serving as a kind of bridge between the Snyderverse and James Gunn's new Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters slate, fans will be anxious to see the transition. And oh boy, is Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom going to be a very interesting movie, because there's a lot of people who want this film to fail. I believe this film is better than you're being told it is, because I tell you what, James Wan is a great director. When was the last time James Wan made a shit movie? But if they cut all these cameos out, then it's absolutely ridiculous. Wouldn't it be a great farewell to leave the Keaton cameo? It was great. Wouldn't it be great to leave the Batfleck cameo as well? Maybe the multiverse is converging, and that's what makes James Gunn's new universe possible. That's the way I'd do it. Anyway. As you can see, I am wearing the bare minimum. It's already approaching 30 Celsius here in Cyprus, and I can barely handle it. So don't get too excited, ladies. Maybe the men are excited as well. I mean, look at the sex appeal. Anyway, calm down as we read this next article. Suicide Squad 3 gets a discouraging update from DC Studios CEO. This shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. The Suicide Squad director James Gunn gave his honest response on whether or not the DC movie will receive a sequel or not. Despite positive reviews from fans and critics, it remains to be seen if Suicide Squad 3 is in the cards, especially after Gunn played coy about the topic. Moreover, the arrival of DC's upcoming reboot could hinder plans for a potential Task Force X continuation. With two movies already released through David Ayer's Suicide Squad 2016 and James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. Here's the thing. Peacemaker was literally a direct sequel to James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. He already did a little sequel. Waller will be the second sequel to James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. So somehow he has been able to continue this, and he will continue it in that way with Peacemaker 2. So, he's done sequels already, not cinematically, but on streaming. But basically, Waller will be like a movie. That will be the quality of it. That's what Peacemaker was. That's what Peacemaker 2 it will be as well. So it's all relative. It's a moot point. On Inside View with Michael Rosenbaum, the Suicide Squad director and current CEO of DC Studios, co-CEO, Peter Safran is actually his boss. James Gunn talked about Peacemaker Season 2, Waller, and the potential of Suicide Squad 3. While confirming that Peacemaker is coming back right after he finishes work on directing Superman Legacy, Rosenbaum asked about the sequel to the Suicide Squad, but Gunn responded by pointing out that the Viola Davis-led Waller spin-off series will be first. Rosenbaum, is Peacemaker really coming back, or is there just no time for it? Gunn, no, Peacemaker's coming back right after Superman. That's my next thing. Now, this is why he was hesitant to direct Superman Legacy. He wanted to get into Peacemaker 2 quicker, because that's what he was meant to do with DC. Continue developing his Suicide Squad universe. That's his strengths. But he was dragged into this co-CEO stuff, and now he's writing and directing Superman Legacy. The future of a whole studio is on the shoulders of James Gunn. That's a lot of pressure to bear for anyone. If he pulls this off, wow. Anyway, no Peacemaker's coming back right after Superman. That's my next thing. Rosenbaum. So then you're just walk in. Yeah, go straight from Superman to Peacemaker. Rosenbaum. Suicide Squad 2, Gunn. But Waller's first, and Waller's a lot of the same people from Peacemaker. So I mean, this is all. But yeah. When Rosenbaum asked again if the Suicide Squad sequel will happen, Gunn only responded by saying no. Let me repeat. When Rosenbaum asked again if the Suicide Squad sequel would happen, Gunn only responded by saying no. As I say, Peacemaker, Peacemaker 2 and Waller are those sequels, but they're on television. He made it clear that he was excited to move his career on to streaming over theatrically after the Suicide Squad failed. That dented his ego. Now, obviously, he did Guardians 3, he's doing Superman Legacy, he's back in theatres, and he's going to be doing streaming as well. And by the way, don't be surprised if James Gunn also ends up directing Batman Brave and the Bold, which could delay Peacemaker again. Watch out for that. In June 2022, Gunn confirmed in an interview with The Playlist that they've talked about doing a proper sequel to the Suicide Squad, but he just has so many hours in a day to work on stuff. Yeah, we've talked about it, but the honest truth is I just have so many hours in a day to work on stuff, and I had such fun time working in television. I really think that's what I'm going to spend the next year of my life doing. I remember this quote, and I just basically spoke to you about it. This was during a time before he took over for DC Studios, assumed directing duties on Superman Legacy, and rebooted slate was announced. In the interview, Gunn mentioned then that he wasn't sure what his next film project would be under the DC banner. But this is a very, very interesting thing, because he kept on talking about a mystery project for a very, very long time. So it's obvious what he knew this reboot was happening and Superman was happening for a very long time. He started talking about this mystery project not long after the Suicide Squad was released. Do you remember? Superman Legacy was the mystery project. So they knew this was happening a long time before they claim they did. Could it be that James Gunn, when brought on to do the Suicide Squad and rumours came out about him being offered Superman, lied about rejecting doing a Superman movie because he always knew from the days of the Suicide Squad that the new DCU was happening? In the interview, Gunn mentioned then that he wasn't sure what his next film project could be under the DC banner, noting that it could be a DC movie that has to do with the Suicide Squad characters, but he's unsure if that could be a Suicide Squad movie or something else that's within that world. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next, because it could be a movie outside of DC, but it could be a DC movie that has to do with these characters. Does not mean it's the Suicide Squad movie or something else that's within that world or a little bit different than that. Yeah, Superman. And that I'm not exactly sure. He was lying. Why DC does not need a Suicide Squad 3. Here we go. James Gunn's firm denial of not developing Suicide Squad 3 could essentially mean that the prequel is not happening. This is fitting, since making a follow-up to the Suicide Squad could only confuse fans, considering that a new DC reboot is on its way. Well, at this moment in time, it's a soft reboot, but in the end, it may become a full reboot. Be aware of that. In fact, it seems that fans have already lost interest in the current iteration of the DCEU. Warner Bros. Discovery already suffered 3 major box office flops in a row, starting with Black Adam and just recently The Flash. You forgot about Shazam! Fury of the Gods as well. Funny that. Some have even argued that abandoning Peacemaker Season 2, which is connected to the Suicide Squad, should be considered, mainly because it would further add confusion to those who are fully expecting a clean slate. But he's been honest that it's not a clean slate. But your general audience are not always listening to what Lord Gunn is saying, and that's the problem. There is confusion out there. A total clean slate would destroy that confusion. But this is the industry that must shave against the grain and do the wrong things when people like me are giving them good, strong advice. But who are you? What do you know? You don't work here. But I do work in the arts. I do understand what works and what doesn't. And you need to start listening to people from your customer base, your consumer base, because we do have some very good measured advice. At this point, Suicide Squad 3 appears to be off the table, as Gunn is now focused on introducing new actors and characters in the new DCEU. The Suicide Squad is streaming on Max. Thank you very much. I have it on 4K and Blu-ray. I don't need to stream your shitty streaming service. Streaming is dead. So we look at Suicide Squad. I'm still perplexed that we had a Suicide Squad as the third movie of the DC Extended Universe. I mean, listen, look what they did to that film. I kind of enjoy the movie they messed with and basically made it their own, that the studio kind of made movie, interfered with movie. But still, I think the third movie in a new franchise was far too early, and I think part of the reason why James's Suicide Squad wasn't too successful is that people are not too interested in a Suicide Squad movie. It can have a place, so basically the Max streaming James Gunn shows are part of his Suicide Squad universe. They're the sequels to James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, and that's why you are never going to get a Suicide Squad 3. I think it would be a good idea to forget Peacemaker 2 and Waller, but they won't because they're insane. The Snyderverse challenged everybody's ideals on what a comic book movie franchise should be, on what comic book movies should be. This is why audiences were divided. You had a director in Zack Snyder saying, "Get the fuck real. My characters are in the real world." It was Christopher Nolan that created this realism in comic book movies with his Dark Knight trilogy. This was very popular with critics and fans. But when we got to the realism in Man of Steel, people rejected that concept. Now, the general audience certainly did. A lot of you out there love it. I love it. But it didn't make enough money for it to become a trend. Because that's not what generally people want from Superman. And this is why we're getting Superman Legacy, to readdress that balance. For the past decade, we've had director versus studio. Director versus the general audience. Director versus everyone, apart from his fans. I don't care about the general audience, he told one fan. I care about you, his fans, because his fans have been propping him up for a decade and fighting for him. What the Snyderverse did was cause a disconnect because they had someone like Snyder, an outlier, a rebel, someone who wants to give you realism with these comic book characters like Superman and Batman. But when you've got Batman branding people, you're going to have a bit of a problem with diehard fans. It wasn't just some members of the general audience that were very angry with Zack Snyder. As I mentioned on yesterday's video, it was comic book writers, artists, people who worked within Warner Brothers Pictures, didn't like him, didn't like his non-conformity attitude, and there was a big divide within the studio. Because guess what? You either know this or you don't. As usual, some of you say, "You're wrong, Mick." I ain't wrong. Warner Brothers Pictures never wanted to be involved with Zack Snyder in terms of the DCEU. That was totally on Christopher Nolan, and the studio didn't want to make waves with Nolan, so they allowed it. This was the biggest mistake ever. Even though I love the Snyderverse in terms of money, in terms of a bottom line, it didn't work. You can say, yeah, they made money. They made more money than most of the Hamadaverse, but ultimately, it wasn't enough money for the studio. And this is where we are now. Now, let me give you an analogy. We're not going to talk about Snyder for about a couple of minutes now, because I thought of a great analogy. Just now. I actually posted it on Twitter the other day, but it came to my mind again. Some people, when their dogs poo on their favourite expensive rug, basically get the dog's head and rub the dog's face in the poo. This is to teach the dog not to do it again. This is exactly what should have happened to Walter Hamada. He should have been made to stay in his position as DC Films president and face the shit of his DCU. His shitty Batgirl movie got shelved, he sulked, and he quit. You can't stop someone from quitting. So he went away. Someone had to take responsibility for this shit show. Anyway, that's my little analogy about Hamada. It's still funny when people do articles about why the Flash movie failed. Hamada's name is never mentioned. It is fucking mind-boggling. Probably done on purpose to please their overlords at Warner Brothers Pictures and Warner Brothers Discovery. So the Snyderverse divided audiences because it was bleak, it was different. It wasn't all bleak, yes, sometimes Superman smiled, sometimes it was optimistic, but most of the time it was gloomy and realistic. And the general audience rejected that. Whether you like what Zack did, I liked what he did. It was very artistic, it was very bold, I enjoyed it. But not everybody did. And if you're a studio, you want to please as many people as possible because that's how winning is done. That's how you make $1 billion, $2 billion. Man of Steel should have made well above $1 billion. Batman vs Superman should have made Force Awakens and Spider-Man No Way Home money. Facts. And it didn't because it divided the audience. Because of the way Snyder, Nolan and Goya did Man of Steel, and the way, Terrio and Snyder wrote and made Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice. Of course, Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice shouldn't have happened at that stage. It should have been a direct Man of Steel sequel. So we lived as fans in a decade of so much toxicity and negativity. That toxicity and negativity leaked out of the studio and it affected us. Right now, as I see people reacting to the casting of James Gunn's Superman Legacy, I still see people arguing. Did Cavill have a contract? Didn't he have a contract? Henry Cavill hadn't had a contract with Warner Brothers Pictures for many, many years, and he wasn't given one. They lied about him returning as Superman, as I said on the top of the show, to uplift the box office of Black Adam. Henry was in on this, and they made it worth his while as a one-off. That's why he did that big monologue on Instagram when James Gunn told him he wouldn't continue as Superman. He knew that when he shot that post-credit scene for Black Adam. That's a hot take, isn't it, everyone? You don't believe me. You don't have to. I'm plugged in and clued up enough to know this is factual. I have mentioned this to you on several times, and I said on the top of the show as well. Same thing's going to happen with Andy Muschietti. Andy Muschietti is never directing Brave and the Bold. You just wait and see. But that stuff is the reason, when you bring in a director that kind of stirs the pot, as Snyder did, this is what happens. And Snyder boldly said on Vero one day, I like stirring the pot. I love triggering people with my movies. I like people talking about my movies. I don't want to be disrespectful about Aquaman, he said, but no one's talking about Aquaman. But Aquaman made over $1 billion, Zach. Now, maybe many people won't remember Aquaman in 20 years. I think it's a fine CBM. Because if all you've got is making people angry and dividing people about your films, it's not great. Again, calm down before I get the Snyderverse hate. I love Zack and I love his movies, but not in a central universe. Never. That was a mistake. Now, if they had the foresight to say, hey, Mr. Snyder, you're a great auteur. Hey, Mr. Nolan. Hey, Mr. Goya, there's a little corner over there. Go and sit there, make your movies. But you're not making them for the general audience, but do what you want. Do your thing over there. We're going to have a central thing here. But the thing is, you can't do that. You can't have Superman in a corner over there and Superman centrally. It just doesn't work. I mean, you can have, I think you can have the Lois, you can have the Lois and Clark show while having Superman Legacy, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think by 2025, there'll be no Superman and Lois. We're going to talk about Superman and Lois at the end of this show very, very soon. But I think having, the same character in a movie there and the same character there is going to make one of those versions suffer. So you've got to have a central universe, and they've got to drop this multiverse bullshit. They're going to have the same problem again with Batman Brave and the Bold and Matt Reeves' The Batman Universe. Matt Reeves' The Batman Universe was already there. You can't get rid of it. It's a 750 million property. It's successful. So how can they deliver a Batman in Brave and the Bold which makes as much money as the one over there? Well, that's simple. What they're going to do, they're going to have a bright and light and fantastical Batman in the central James Gunn universe, while Matt Reeves does his more grim, classic Batman, if you like. That may work. I think it's easier to have two Batmen than to have more than one Superman, because Batman is so relatable and popular. Superman's relatable and popular, but it's difficult to get one version of Superman right, let alone two. Talking about getting Superman right, what about that Superman and Lois season 3 finale? So Bizarro, in the end, became Doomsday. And there's this brilliant fight. There's been two, source material accurate versions of Doomsday live action. And that's been on the Krypton television show and now on Superman and Lois. I love the VFX and design for Zack Snyder's Doomsday, but it isn't that accurate to the source material. That's the end. You can love it, you can hate it. I don't think it's bad, it's just not accurate to the source material. And I think we can all say that the death of Superman in that arc came way too soon. We needed a Man of Steel sequel, and then maybe a couple more movies' time, they could have done that. They rushed for a crossover straight after Man of Steel, and it simply didn't work for the general audience. But Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, the Ultimate Edition, is a great movie. Anyway, the Superman and Lois season 3 finale gave us a great cliffhanger. Now, spoilers coming, just a little spoiler because this was my favourite bit. As they're fighting and they're about to run at each other, Doomsday literally takes one of those spikes, no, two of the spikes, and he's running towards Superman with the spikes in his hand. What's going to happen? We're going to have to wait till next season to find out. Imagine if they didn't give that a season 4. People would have went fucking nuts. I expect Superman and Lois either to run till the end of the next season, which is season 4, or they may even give it a season 5. I think 5 is as long as it's going to go. But let me be absolutely clear about Superman and Lois. It's one of the best live action adaptations of Superman. It has united the fan base. Now, the ratings are not huge, but it's CW level ratings. They don't have, physically and mathematically, they can't do more than a certain amount of ratings. So when you're doing a ratings kind of report on your platforms for the CW, you always make your audience know that there's only, basically I think they can do 2 to 3 million at most. It's not physically possible and numerically possible for them to do any more than that. But Superman and Lois is a great adaptation. I'm really enjoying it. I think it's great. Tyler Hoechlin is a great Superman. Lizzie Tulloch is a great Lois. I must admit I was a bit triggered by her casting at first. I thought, this is not Lois. But I gave it a chance, like I'm giving Superman Legacy a chance. I think that's right and fair, and I'm optimistic about James Gunn's approach to DC and Superman. And I'll judge it on consumption. I judged Lizzie's performance as Lois on consumption, and she's absolutely fantastic. As I say, Tyler is fantastic, but it just feels so warm. It feels optimistic, but there's also a darkness and a kind of grim environment around Superman and Lois. It does the best of both worlds, which I really like. And I think that Superman and Lois is a Superman adaptation people will remember fondly for a very long time. There has been, like the Snyderverse kind of divided audiences, Superman and Lois has kind of reversed that feeling. It's united Superman fans. At the end of the day, you can't make the general audience like something they don't want to like. They want Superman to be optimistic, and this is what Superman Legacy and the DCU is about to do. You've had your 3 movies of a Superman and a Batman in the real well. I don't know if we can restore the Snyderverse in a little corner somewhere. Maybe we can, maybe we won't. I don't know right now. I do know that DC right now in live action needs to heal. And hopefully Superman Legacy can heal it.